Boker Rabotai, B'Reshut Ma'alat Alav. So we're continuing our study of the Tariag Mitzvot. And today we are at the 240th Mitzvah. And it is a negative commandment, Shelo lehalbin b'nei Adam b'Yisrael. And that is the law, most important one, Parashat Kedushim, that we're not allowed to embarrass a fellow Jew. Now the source pasuk that they learned this from is Hocheyach tochiach et amitecha v'lo tisa alav het. Now the context of this pasuk is where somebody is rebuking his friend because he did something wrong. But the Torah warns us that you shouldn't do it in public. Because when you criticize somebody publicly, he gets embarrassed, he gets shamed. And the Hachamim come along and tell us from here, Lefi shehaboshet sa'ar gadol labiriyot, en gadol mimenu. The Sefer Chinuch writes that there's a lot of things that agonize and pain people. But the most painful of all things that a person can endure is to be embarrassed and to be shamed. Therefore he says, V'al ken mena'nu ha'en militza'el b'riyotav. Borei Olam refrains us with a negative commandment that to cause this agony to our peers. V'lachen tzarich lehochiach b'yachid kedei shelo yitbayesh ha'choteh kol kach. That's when you're rebuking your friend, we have something to say. We call it positive criticism or corrective criticism. It should always be done b'tzana'ah and in private. The Chinuch then goes on and gives us two very important ideas on this mitzvah. He says, first of all, when we rebuke our friends, we can be giving him tochaha for one of two averot. One is ben Adam lahavero, and one is ben Adam lamakom. So he writes that when it comes to things that are between man and his fellow, then already we have to be very sensitive. However, if a person is in contempt of the mitzvot between man and God, and he does not want to accept the rebuke, then already he writes, it's a mitzvah for the Hachamim and the Nevi'im to even publicly go and shame the person until he comes back to the right path. And as we've seen in history, the prophets used to go in front of all the people and publicize their sins. Number two, and this is so important, is what the Gemara says, Noach lo le'adam sheyapil atzmo lechivshana esh al yalbin penei havero barabim. A person has to be willing to jump into a fire, even though he'll die, but to refrain from embarrassing his friend. That's how much mesirut nefesh a person has to have in order not to embarrass. And the example the Gemara brings, of course, is from Tamar. Tamar was the daughter-in-law of Yehudah. She was pregnant from Yehudah. She knew it, but Yehudah didn't know it. Yehudah was the Abedin. He sees his daughter-in-law pregnant. He figured and assumed that it was from someone else. He looked at the evidence, and he said, based on the evidence, she is guilty. She's the daughter of a Kohen that committed znut, and her punishment must be serefah. And he put the gavel down, hayevet mitah. Tamar then, in a very, very respectful way, gave a hint to Yehudah that actually Yehudah was the father of these babies. However, she did not publicly confront Yehudah to say that it is him, because that would have embarrassed Yehudah in front of all the Bedin. And she was willing to die mitat serefah just in order not to embarrass Yehudah. I want to point out, not only she was willing to die, but she was willing to take the two babies that were in her womb, Peretz and Zerah. So it's three people that was going to take the mitav serefah in order not to embarrass the tzaddik. Of course, we know that Yehudah in the end said, no, it's me, and he confessed. But Tamar was willing, even if he would not have confessed, in order to keep the dignity of Yehudah intact, not to shame. So the Gemara said, look how much, to the extent one has to go to in order, he has to accept even physical harm, God forbid, in order to preserve the dignity and not to embarrass his friend. Now there's an amazing maharal over here. Maharal from Prague explains what the Gemara means when it says in Baba Mitzian Nun Chet that if somebody embarrasses his friend, it's like he's killing him. Ki'ilu shofech damim. Now, isn't that sound like a little exaggeration? Like you're killing him? I mean, you didn't kill anybody. He's still alive. Why does the Gemara say it's like you're killing him? So he says something amazing. He said every Jew has what's called Tselem Elokim. Tselem Elokim is the image that God put in all of us. That image is a spiritual image. And when the Mekatrigim and the Mazikim, those are the negative forces, when they see it, and they can see it, they're afraid of us. When the Tzaddikim used to walk down the street, the Tzelem Elokim is so strong, even the animals are afraid of them. When they threw Daniel into the lion's den, when the lions saw the Tzelem Elokim of Daniel, they got afraid. That is the power of a human being. Now, this Tzelem Elokim is very, very fragile. And if somebody comes along and disrespects his fellow Jew, he's pogem in the Tzelem Elokim. He takes, and today maybe in psychology they call it the self-esteem, but it's not self-esteem. This is something that's spiritual. And this spiritual Tzelem Elokim, or spiritual self-esteem that we have, is sensitive. If somebody is pogem, if somebody attacks it, it becomes diminished, it becomes weakened. And therefore the Gemara says, for example, if a person has a guest, and he doesn't escort his guest and give him mitzvah levaya when he's walking him out of the house, he puts him in danger. Because when you don't escort your guest, you're showing him you're not important. Therefore, go walk on your own. And therefore, he diminishes the tzelem elokim, and now he's in danger. Because now the mazikim, they don't see the tzelem. Because somebody just disregarded him. And that disregard puts him in peril. The same thing when a person embarrasses his friend. He's saying you're worthless, you're a nothing. And then when you're tzelem elokim, it's zero. And therefore, by doing that, he lowers his energy of the tzelem. Now, God forbid, he can get hurt. And therefore, not only are we hurting the person by embarrassing him, but we're putting him now in danger. And that's why the Maharal says, Ki'ilu shofech damim. There's something spiritually that happens to a person when you diminish his respect. Not only do you ruin his self-esteem, but you ruin his tzelem elokim. And now that person over there, Chas v'Shalom, is in danger. Nonetheless, this mitzvah is noheget bechol makom, in all places, at all times, zecharim and nekevot. Somebody transgresses this and was malbin peneh havero barabim, and he did it b'mezid, he transgresses this mitzvah. Unfortunately, we can't give him malkut for this because it's a lav she'en bo ma'aseh. It's verbal, and on verbal we don't give lashes. However, the Rav writes, "Bekama shiluchim lamakom lehakoto or lehipara me'ovrei ritzono." Borei Olam has many ways to take retribution against ovrei ritzono. So although he might escape the punishment of bedin, but Borei Olam's justice is able to catch up with him. And again, we learn how important over here is that we must treat every one of our fellow Jews with white gloves. We have to treat them with the right respect. And by that, we're elevating and increasing the tzelem elokim. And in a dangerous world today, everybody needs to have a strong tzelem in order to be protected. And it's in our ability to offer protection for one another by giving each other the proper respect.